Today, I want to talk to you a little bit more on the subject of the Trelawney residents who had their homes demolished. Now, granted that there are some other people there who have not lost their home, but I want to talk to you about the raw politics and the hypocrisy of Mark Golden and his team, including Dennis Meadows and Ice Pratt Buchanan. Number one, there have been several rulings by the court granting the legitimate property owner full rights and the ability to recover their property from the people who are squatting there. Number two, contrary to popular belief, and those of you who have followed me over the years know that I've always been calling for the law called adverse possession to be repealed. It is a bad law. It was designed to allow squatting, and it was put on steroids in the 70s by Mike and Manley. Now, on top of that, the adverse possession law creates in the Jamaican people, to a large extent, the feeling that they can simply build a structure on someone's property if the person is not developing the land, not doing anything with the land, and it automatically becomes theirs. It's not true. Even though in the entirety of that law, it is flawed, still, the law does not give anyone permission to erect a structure, least of all a permanent structure, on someone's property and then claim that property as their own, disabusing the person of their right to their property. This piece of property in Trelawney that is in question was not owned by rich people from the colonial period. And this is what makes this Backra Massa and his gang of thieves so egregious, so dishonest, so hypocritical, because Mark Golding was a former Minister of Justice. Ice Pratt Buchanan says he's a lawyer and he fancies himself as a human rights activist. Now, where is the right of this property owner? They don't care because it's all in the name of politicking. And so today, I want to speak to you, not in an elongated manner. I don't want to take up too much of your time. But for the love of God, honesty and integrity matters, and it should matter. We cannot have politicians taking both sides of the issue when it comes to the rule of law because it suits them. We cannot have that. Mark Golan is a dishonest creep. Ice Pratt Buchanan, that's what I expect from him. He's a criminal. Not once, twice convicted criminal. And his utterances has been beyond outrageous. So I don't expect anything from him. I don't expect any better from him. He endorses scamming. This is the scraping the bottom of the barrel and putting it in Parliament and empowering it. That's up to the people of East Portland. Live with your decision. Live with your decision, East Portland. But there are laws in our country, and we must follow our laws. And the laws cannot apply when Mark Golan, Dennis Meadows, or Ice Pratt Buchanan think it should apply. The law is the law. And when Mark Golding is going to talk about the rule of law, and he's going to talk about justice, and he's going to talk about the poor people. Let us begin with the understanding that this guy, he's a hypocrite. He's a hypocrite. And everything that he does is in the name of currying favor. He's pandering. He's disgraceful, but he has no shame. Mark Golding has no shame. And as such, Mark Golding should never, ever set foot in Jamaica House unless he visits like everybody else. Poverty is not a license for anybody to steal. And so Jamaica must defend the right to own property. So let us stop lying to ourselves about what is happening in Jamaica. There is a conversation taking place about poverty rights, about poverty and property rights, homelessness, squatting, and the demolition of houses. So today, let us strip away the politics. Let us strip away the sympathy games. Let us strip away the partisan nonsense. And let us confront one brutally uncomfortable truth. Poverty is real. Homelessness is real. The desperation of Jamaicans who cannot afford land is real. But poverty does not give anybody the moral or legal right to take another person's property. And if Jamaica ever loses sight of that principle, then we will have done something far more destructive than demolishing a few illegal structures. We will have demolished the very idea of property ownership. And when property rights collapses, economic opportunity collapses with them. Recently, Jamaica witnessed the demolition of approximately 20 homes in Cooper's Pentrelawney. The operation took place before dawn, involving heavy equipment, police, and a bailiff. By the end of the exercise, houses that families had occupied were reduced to rubble. Those images were heartbreaking. Nobody should look at a family standing beside the ruins of their home and feeling nothing. But there's another side of the story that must be spoken about just as loudly. If those houses were constructed on land that legally belonged to somebody else, then somebody else's rights matter too. That land may have represented someone's life savings. It may have been inherited from parents or grandparents. It may have been purchased with money earned overseas. It may have been intended for a business, a farm, a house for children, or an investment for the future. And the owner does not become less entitled to that property because somebody else is poorer. That is the part of this debate that some politicians seem terrified to say because it's in their interest to curry favor. Because in Jamaica, the moment you defend the property owner, somebody wants to accuse you of defending the rich against the poor. That is intellectual laziness. It is intellectual dishonesty. Property rights are not a luxury reserved for wealthy people. Property rights are one of the greatest protections the poor can have. Think about it. A poor man who legitimately owns a small piece of land possesses something that cannot simply be taken from him. He can build on it. He can farm on it. He can mortgage it. He can sell it. He can leave it to his children. He can use it to obtain credit. He can turn that piece of land into an economic asset. That is how poverty begins to become wealth. And if ownership means nothing, if somebody can occupy your land long enough and political pressure can eventually force you to surrender it, then what incentive is there to save, invest, and to build? This is a question that every Jamaican who consider themselves progressive must grapple with. What incentive is there for the Jamaican diaspora to come home and invest? What incentive is there for a farmer to buy additional land? What incentive is there for a young Jamaican to spend years paying for a piece of property if somebody else can simply move on to it? And this is where Jamaica's political hypocrisy must be confronted. The Jamaican Constitution protects property rights. Compulsory acquisition is subject to law, including provisions concerning compensation and access to the courts. At the same time, Jamaican law recognizes adverse possession under certain circumstances. That means this issue is not as simple as saying anybody who squats is a criminal, nor is it as simple as saying anybody who has lived somewhere for years automatically owns the land. The courts have made clear that adverse possession requires specific legal elements, including factual possession and the intention to possess. And it is not created merely because somebody has put a zinc fence around a piece of land or built a house on it. The Supreme Court of Jamaica, that distinction matters because Jamaica needs compassion without surrendering the rule of law. And Jamaica needs land for poor people. But the answer cannot be to make another Jamaican legally owned land the welfare program. If Jamaica needs land for the landless, then the government must create legitimate pathways to land ownership. That is precisely why the government has recently been discussing land titling, regularization, informal settlements, and reforms to adverse possession. The government itself has acknowledged that Jamaica needs both land for the landless and respect for property rights. That is the conversation we should be having, not political theater, not outrage manufactured for social media. We need solutions because here's the brutal reality of poverty. Poverty does not disappear because we allow people to build illegally. It simply becomes institutionalized, and informal settlements frequently leave poor people with no secure title, no proper infrastructure, no reliable access to service, and no asset they can legitimately pass down to their children. Jamaica's own national squatter management policy acknowledged the enormous weakness in formal ownership. It reported that in 2019, only 29.1% of Jamaican households had registered full ownership of both their dwelling and the land on which they live. And that's from the Ministry of Education. That is the real crisis, not simply squatting. The real crisis is that too many Jamaicans have never been brought into a functioning system of secure land ownership. So let us build one. Give poor Jamaicans legitimate opportunities to purchase land. Accelerate titling. Regularize settlements where legal and environmentally appropriate. Make government land available through transparent programs. Crack down on land scammers. Make land registration firmer and cheaper. And make sure that every Jamaican understands one fundamental principle. If you want to own land, Jamaica should make it easier, not harder, easier for you to become the legal owner, not easier for you to become an illegal occupier. And now we come to Mark Golding. Mark Golding is not an ordinary political commentator. He's a leader of Jamaica's opposition. He's also a lawyer. That means the Jamaican public has every right to expect him to understand the difference between sympathy for a poor family and the legal right of ownership. You cannot build a credible society by treating the rights of one group as sacred while treading on the rights of another and treating another group's property rights as negotiable. And if Mark Golding wants to criticize the manner in which demolitions are conducted, then he should do so. If families were denied due process and proper notice, due of lawful treatment that demand, and it demands answers. If excessive force was used, investigate it. If government officials acted outside the law, prosecute the matter. But there is a world of difference between saying the law must be followed in removing illegal occupants and saying the existence of poverty somehow makes the underlying property claim irrelevant. The first position is responsible opposition. The second would be political opportunism. And Isaac Buchanan deserved the same scrutiny. Isaac Buchanan has publicly condemned the Cooper's Pen demolition and raised questions about the operation, including allegations concerning the detention of men during the exercise. Those questions deserve proper investigation if substantiated. But condemnation must not become selective morality. If you are genuinely defending human rights, then defend everybody's rights. Defend the poor family whose house has been demolished, but defend the Jamaican who legally owns the land underneath that house. Defend the squatter against unlawful state conduct, but defend the property owner against unlawful occupation. Defend due process. Defend the Constitution. Defend the rights of every Jamaican to seek justice in a court of law. Because human rights do not belong exclusively to poor people whose political circumstances are convenient. And this is where I challenge the opposition. Do not weaponize poverty. Do not turn poor Jamaicans into political shields. Do not tell people that the reason they are poor is because somebody else owns land. That is a dangerous lie. The real enemy of poor Jamaican is not the Jamaican who legally owns a piece of property. The enemy is a system that leaves people without affordable access to land, without serious titles, without decent housing, without adequate wages, and without a credible path into the ownership economy. That is what politicians should be fighting for, because ownership changes lives. A little title changes the family's economic position. A house can become collateral. Land can become a farm can become a business can employ people, and wealth can move from one generation to the next. That is how you fight poverty, not by the redistributing insecurity, by creating ownership. And let us all be honest about something else. The government simply cannot bulldoze its way out of Jamaican squatter settlements. It cannot. And I'm not suggesting that the government was the one responsible for bulldozing the houses. It wasn't. If people have lived somewhere for years, sometimes decades, government has a responsibility to deal with the human consequences of enforcement. Give notice, provide due process, identify vulnerable families, create relocation options where appropriate, offer legitimate opportunities for regularization where the law permits, and prosecute land scammers who sell people land they did not own or they do not own. But compassion must not become capitulation, because when compassion becomes a license to violate somebody else's property rights, eventually everybody becomes vulnerable. Today it is the absentee landowner. Tomorrow it could be you. Today it is somebody else's farm. Tomorrow it could be your house. Today it is a Jamaican living overseas who hasn't visited the property in 10 years. Tomorrow he could be the same farmer who has worked that land for 40 years, and then we will suddenly discover that property rights mattered after all. No, they mattered from the beginning. So I'll say this without apology. Jamaica must have a heart for the poor, but Jamaica must also have a spine. We must provide land for the landless. We must provide houses for people who cannot afford it. We must attack poverty. We must take legal ownership, make legal land ownership easier. We must reform a system that has left too many Jamaicans trapped in informal settlements. But we must never teach the next generation that the solution to poverty is to take what belongs to somebody else. That is not justice. That is simply another form of injustice. And to Mark Golding and Buchanan, I say this: if you want to challenge the government, challenge it on facts. Challenge the legality of the demolition. Challenge the process. Challenge the treatment of the resident. Demand transparency. Demand accountability. But don't pretend that defending poor people requires abandoning the rights of property owners, because that is not justice. Justice is protecting both. And if you genuinely believe in a better Jamaica, then stand up and say something that is politically inconvenient, but morally necessary. A poor Jamaican deserves a home. A Jamaican landowner deserves his goddamn land. A citizen deserves this due process, and the government deserves the authority to enforce the law. Those principles are not enemies. They're supposed to work together. They are not mutually exclusive. The tragedy of Cooper's Pen should therefore not be used merely as another weapon in Jamaica's endless political warfare. Let it become a warning that poverty left untreated eventually produces desperate settlements. A warning that weak land administration creates conflict. A warning that illegal occupation creates victims on both sides. A warning that political parties cannot continue to exploit the poor every election cycle without solving the conditions that keep producing poverty. And above all, let it remind Jamaica of something fundamental. The right to own property is not enemy of the poor. It is one of the greatest weapons the poor can ever possess. So let us stop fighting over the rubble. Let us not do that anymore. Let us not follow these rapacious, greedy, power-hungry politicians. Jamaicans, where a poor man can legally acquire land, he should be allowed to do so. Where a woman can obtain a title in her own name, where a farmer can protect his acreage, where a returning Jamaican can invest without fear, where government land cannot be fraudulently sold by political hustlers, where squatters are given a legitimate pathway to ownership where appropriate, where landowners do not have to live in fear that abandonment will eventually destroy their rights, and where the law is not a political suggestion, it is the goddamn law. Because Jamaica does not need another generation of learning how to occupy. Jamaica needs a new generation that generally understands the process of owning property. And that is the difference in managing property. That is how we manage rights. We do not manage rights by political opportunism. We do not manage rights by photo ops. We do not manage rights by pretending to be speaking for the poor when we know we're not speaking for the poor. All we're seeking is more for power for those who already have power, and ignoring the laws because it suits you. That is not the way to go about it. So when we turn wealthy people into local gods and we worship them, even when we know without a shadow of a doubt that they do not have our interests at heart, and when we take people who jump from party to party, political opportunism, because they believe that jumping to another party is going to suit their political interests, we should admonish and discharge them, and we should get rid of them. We should never cast a vote for them. We should relegate them to the dustbin of history. And when we see a criminal who was convicted for serious felons, and they go to another jurisdiction and they commit the same crimes, we should believe our eyes. We should believe our eyes that they're not about change. And when those dish rags show us that they're not worthy of our trust, we should believe them. And when we see them violate that trust over and over and over without any respect for anyone, we should believe what they tell us, what they show us. Not about what they say, but what they do, because actions matter. But now that ship has sailed, and in our parliament and in our bar association, we now see a twice convicted felon, a drug felon, incorporated into high places, into police positions of leadership, into positions of lawmaking. And as I said before, what does it say about those of you who cast a vote for him? And on the wider spectrum, what does it say about our country and the direction our country is heading? But more than everything else, what does it say of a political party who drafted this twice convicted coke, this dealer, into the party and foisted him up on the Jamaican people as a leader? You have to make your own choices. Folks, this has been another iteration of the Deep Dive. Listen, if you're not yet subscribed, costs you nothing, man. Hit the notification bell, subscribe, hit the notification bell, so when we upload new videos, you'll be notified right away. Leave us a comment. Please be respectful. Leave us a comment, like, and share our videos. Costs you nothing. And I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one.